"No one can tame this predator," Instructor Varnox said, his 6 golden eyes narrowing as he jabbed a claw toward the reinforced containment field. Inside the field, a creature the size of a compact car pressed its plated head against the transparent barrier. Its deep violet scales shimmered under the lab's artificial lights, and rows of serrated teeth glistened beneath a snout that twitched at every movement outside its enclosure. The beast's tail, thick and barbed, swayed with slow, deliberate menace. The room fell silent except for the low hum of the energy field and the creature's ragged breathing. Standing at the back, Nathaniel Drake didn't speak. He just scratched at the stubble on his chin and glanced again at the animal. It didn't look like it wanted to kill everything. It looked hungry. And tired, Varnox turned away from the viewing window and addressed the class of interspecies xenobiology cadets. The Rakkari is a solitary apex predator native to the shadow forests of Rakkari Prime. It has no known weaknesses, no natural predators, and no history of positive interaction with any intelligent species. It cannot be negotiated with, it cannot be reasoned with. Several attempts at domestication have ended in fatality. Do not approach it. The warning was followed by a series of gruesome images flashing across the display behind him. Torn armor, shredded limbs. A snapped containment suit with dark blood pooled around it. Most of the students turned away. Nathaniel didn't. Later, after the others had dispersed, Nathaniel lingered by the observation window. The Rakkari watched him. Not with rage or mindless aggression, but with curiosity. He tapped the glass. The creature didn't flinch. "You're not insane," he muttered. "You're just stuck." "Cadet Drake," Varnox's voice boomed from behind. "Do you find this amusing?" "No, sir," Nathaniel said, adjusting the strap of his utility pack. "Just thinkin' about biology, behavior. You said the Rakkaris from Rakkari Prime. That planet's got berry thickets the size of houses, right?" Varnox blinked, his head tilting with a soft mechanical whir. "That is irrelevant. The Rakkari is an obligate carnivore." "Right, but obligate doesn't mean exclusive. Means it needs meat, not that it won't try other stuff." Varnox stared at him. Nathaniel shrugged. "Just wondering." That night, Nathaniel returned to the enclosure unauthorized. He kept low, moving among the shadows cast by the overhead lighting. The security system was advanced, but he'd studied it for weeks. A short bypass on the maintenance panel gave him access to the secondary viewing chamber, a small alcove with a feeding chute and reinforced observation slit. From his pack, he pulled a small container of berries. Not just any berries, he'd spent 2 weeks bartering with a Rakkari botanist to get the exact kind that grew in the Rakkari's native region. Purple-skinned, soft-fleshed, overly sweet. He opened the hatch and placed 3 berries into the chute. The Rakkari didn't move. Nathaniel waited. The beast's nostrils flared. It stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Its claws tapped against the floor, its massive body rumbling with each step. It lowered its head, sniffed once, and then without hesitation ate the berries. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. The Rakkari didn't growl, didn't charge. Just sat back on its haunches and stared at him through the slit. He placed 3 more berries. The same result. Over the next week, Nathaniel didn't tell anyone. He returned every night, rotating the berries, mixing in a few from other planets to test preferences. The Rakkari showed a clear favorite for the Rakkari sweet berries. It didn't just tolerate them. It seemed to enjoy them. On the 8th night, it didn't wait for the berries. It approached the slit as soon as Nathaniel entered the room. It pressed its nose to the barrier and stood still. Nathaniel hesitated, then reached out, laying his hand gently on the thick plastiglass. The Rakkari mirrored the gesture with a clawed paw. Then came the 10th night. Nathaniel brought no berries. The Rakkari prowled restlessly, growling low. "Easy, big guy," Nathaniel whispered. "They're coming. Just had a delay." He reached into his pack, but the moment his hand emerged empty, the Rakkari reared back and slammed its body into the viewing wall. The impact sent Nathaniel flying. He slammed into the metal railing behind him and collapsed. Pain spiked up his side, intense and immediate. He tried to move and gasped. He couldn't feel his left arm. Crawling with his right, he dragged himself toward the access hatch. His breathing came in shallow bursts. Something was wrong with his ribs, maybe cracked. His fingers trembled as he reached the control panel. The Rakkari backed away, snorting, pacing. Not charging, not attacking, but agitated. Nathaniel opened the pack again, this time with his trembling right hand. He found one last berry wedged at the bottom. He held it up. "See," he wheezed. Wasn't lying. The Rakkari stopped moving. It stared at the berry, then at Nathaniel, who was now slumping against the wall, sweat pouring down his face. The creature stepped forward, slower this time. It sniffed, then gently took the berry from Nathaniel's hand through the chute. Then it sat. When the med team arrived 20 minutes later, responding to a tripped silent alarm, they found Nathaniel unconscious, his left arm dislocated and 2 ribs fractured. The Rakkari was lying down, its massive head resting near the window. It didn't move when the others entered. It didn't roar. It just watched. Nathaniel woke up 3 days later in the med bay. "You're lucky," the doctor said. "Another few minutes and you'd have passed out from internal bleeding. You're going to need at least a month before the ribs fully heal." "Arm's in bad shape too, but we managed to reset it," Nathaniel groaned. "How's the Rakkari?" The doctor blinked. "You named it?" "No, just curious." The door slid open and Varnox entered. "You disobeyed orders, violated containment protocols, and nearly died," he said coldly. Nathaniel didn't reply. Varnox approached the bed. "But the Rakkari has not shown aggression since your incident. In fact, it refuses to accept meat unless berries are provided first. It waits by the window every night." Nathaniel smiled weakly. "Told you." "Not insane." "This is not taming," Varnox said. "It is unusual behavior. You said it couldn't be done." "I did, and I am not yet convinced you have done it, but the data suggests a bond, one we do not understand." He turned to leave, then paused. "Rest. You will need your strength." The council now wishes to observe further interactions. Nathaniel didn't care about the council. He just wanted to see the creature again. 2 weeks later, still sore but able to walk with assistance, Nathaniel returned to the enclosure, this time with permission and under supervision. The Rakkari approached the glass the moment he entered. "Hey, buddy," Nathaniel said softly. "Sorry I took so long." He placed a handful of berries into the chute. The Rakkari ignored them. Instead, it pressed its nose to the glass. Nathaniel stepped forward, laid his hand against the same spot. The Rakkari closed its eyes. Varnox watched from the observation deck above. He said nothing, but he was taking notes. 2 days after the supervised reintroduction, Nathaniel returned to the enclosure with a limp in his gait and a stiff canvas wrap around his ribs. The medbay had cleared him for low-impact movement, which apparently meant anything short of sprinting from a fire. His left arm, still mostly non-functional, hung in a sling. He entered through the secondary access corridor, this time escorted by a tall, sinewy alien with translucent armor plates and a clipboard fused into one forearm. "You are required to log every interaction," the liaison said without turning its eyeless head. "No improvisation. We are observing for deviation." Nathaniel nodded. "Sure, no jazz solos." The creature standing across the room, the Rakkari, shifted its weight when it caught sight of him. Its tail twitched once, then stilled. Nathaniel dropped the container of berries into the chute. "Got the good stuff again. One of the senior botanists smuggled them out of a restricted greenhouse for me. Said she owed me for fixing her air scrubber." Didn't mention she meant that literally. The Rakkari didn't approach right away. It was watching the liaison. The tension in its shoulders wasn't subtle. Nathaniel glanced at the observer. "Mind stepping back a little? You're kind of intense." The liaison didn't move. Nathaniel sighed and reached into his satchel. "Fine. We'll do this the hard way." He retrieved a dented harmonica and blew a few slow notes. The Rakkari's head tilted slightly. It blinked once, then moved forward and took the berries. The liaison tapped something on its integrated clipboard. "That sound is not part of the approved routine." It is now, Nathaniel said. Rituals matter. Ask any species with a mating dance. The Rakkari finished eating and lowered itself to the ground, limbs tucked neatly beneath its body. Its breathing had slowed. Nathaniel leaned against the reinforced edge of the wall, careful not to jar his ribs. You know, if I didn't know better, I'd say you're bored in there. The creature made a low, clicking noise. Not hungry, not pacing. That's boredom, isn't it? The liaison clicked its mandibles. Predatory lethargy is common in captivity. Do not anthropomorphize. Nathaniel didn't answer. He reached into his pack again and pulled out a palm-sized metallic disc. With a thumb press, it unfolded into a small holo emitter. He placed it against the glass, and a projection of a forest canopy flickered to life across the transparent barrier. The Rakkari lifted its head. Its nostrils flared. Simulated Drazari light patterns, Nathaniel said. I found some old survey drone footage. Thought it might feel familiar. The creature stood and stepped forward. It didn't touch the glass, just stared. Then it let out a long, low exhale and sat again. See, Nathaniel turned to the liaison. Recognition, that's not just instinct. That's memory. The observer issued a low-frequency chirp into its comm, requesting behavioral analysts to confirm. Nathaniel didn't wait for a reply. He slid down to a seated position, wincing as his ribs protested. You're not just some mindless beast, are you? The Rakkari didn't move. For several minutes, they sat like that, Nathaniel on the floor, the Rakkari just on the other side of the barrier. Then the door behind him hissed open. A new figure entered, cloaked in layers of soft green and brown silk. She had 3 elongated fingers on each hand and a neck that curved like ivy. Her eyes were a flat, opalescent white. I'm told you're disrupting our data collection, she said. Depends on your definition of disrupting, Nathaniel replied. She crouched beside him, angular knees folding sideways. I'm bicellular psychologist Tira. I study cognitive emergence in non-sapient species. Then you're gonna love this guy. Nathaniel looked up at the Rakkari, or gal. Still haven't figured that out. Tira's gaze remained fixed on the creature. Pattern recognition, environmental response, selective feeding, those suggest stimulus conditioning, not cognition. Then explain this. Nathaniel tapped the glass once, then twice. The Rakkari tapped back once, then a pause, then once again. Tira narrowed her eyes. Coincidence. Nathaniel repeated the pattern, then altered it. This time, tap, pause, tap, tap. The Rakkari mimicked it exactly. Tira's head tilted. It's not just learning, Nathaniel said. It's responding. She stood. You're anthropomorphizing again. Maybe. He struggled to his feet. But if you're wrong, we're all wasting our time treating it like a problem instead of a person. Tira didn't reply. She walked to the observation panel and activated the internal scanner. A lattice of blue light swept across the Rakkari's body, mapping muscle tension, heat distribution, and neurocurrent patterns. It didn't flinch. Nathaniel watched as the display filled with data. No fight or flight spikes, Tira murmured. No predatory fixation. Elevated oxytocin analogs. So, Nathaniel said, she looked at him almost reluctantly, it may associate you with safety. The liaison clicked again. This is not taming, this is aberration. Maybe that's the problem, Nathaniel said. You're all looking for a pattern it's supposed to fit into. What if it's trying to make its own? 3 days later, they allowed him to enter the outer chamber. Not the main enclosure, just the buffer zone between the first and second barriers. Enough room to sit, not enough to run. Tira observed from the control room. The liaison stood by the emergency override. 2 guards, both alien species with retractable armor plates, waited near the exit. Nathaniel wore a reinforced vest. It was heavier than anything he'd ever worn, and it pressed hard against the bruises along his side. Every breath felt like a choreographed negotiation. He leaned against the inner wall. You ready for this? He asked the Rakkari, who was standing just meters away on the other side of the last barrier. The creature stepped forward. The inner gate opened. Slowly. Nobody spoke. The Rakkari entered, its eyes, dark and layered with reflective membranes, locked onto Nathaniel. It approached not fast but not cautiously either. Nathaniel didn't move. The creature stopped at arm's length and lowered its head. Nathaniel raised his hand, it leaned in, brushed its snout against his palm, and then, with a strange kind of gentleness, lay down beside him. The guards tensed. Tira said nothing. Nathaniel sat down, letting the Rakkari's shoulder press against his side. He breathed, not easily, not comfortably, but he breathed. Nathaniel's left shoulder was still weak from the dislocation, and the muscles in his lower back throbbed from sitting too long on the cold composite floor. But he'd learned to shift his weight every 40 minutes and kept a thermal patch under his vest to ease the stiffness. The Rakkari didn't seem to mind the occasional groan or grunt when he moved. It had taken to resting its side against his when they were in the chamber together, the way a large dog might lean for warmth or reassurance. 2 weeks had passed since they'd first allowed him into the buffer zone. Since then, the frequency of their sessions had increased. The Rakkari, still officially nameless, though Nathaniel had taken to calling it Cinch under his breath, had begun anticipating his arrival, standing by the inner gate with a strange, patient stillness that unnerved the guards. "They think you're planning something," Nathaniel said one morning as he settled into his usual spot. "I told them you're just better at waiting than they are." Cinch blinked once, slow and deliberate, then let out a rough huff through its nostrils. Nathaniel took that as agreement. A new observer had been assigned to the behavioral logs, a narrow-bodied alien with skin like brushed copper and thin, retractable spines along its forearms. It hadn't introduced itself, and Nathaniel hadn't asked. He'd grown used to being watched like a specimen. What mattered was Cinch no longer reacted to the presence of others. It had stopped pacing entirely. No more posturing, no sudden lunges, no jaw snapping at shadows, just quiet, sustained interaction. "You're bored again, aren't you?" Nathaniel rested his good arm on his bent knee. "I tried to get clearance to bring in some enrichment tools, but apparently everything I suggested was either reckless, unsanitary, or ethically ambiguous." Cinch tilted its head and extended one claw, scratching lazily at the floor. Nathaniel had begun to suspect the creature's intelligence exceeded the xenobiologist's current models. It didn't just react to stimuli, it adapted with eerie speed. On the third day of their sessions, Cinch had begun mimicking the sound of Nathaniel's harmonica, not with vocal cords but by using the ridges in its throat and chest to produce a low, warbling note. It had only done it once. Never again. "They think I'm projecting," Nathaniel said. "That I'm seeing things in you I want to see. Maybe I am. But if I'm wrong, why do you keep showing up like this?" Cinch stretched out one forelimb and curled it under its chest, then the other. Its breathing was steady, deliberate. From a biological standpoint, it should have been in a constant state of agitation, but its posture was calm. Its eyes, always in motion during the early days, had become fixed and observant. "You remember Rakkari Prime?" Nathaniel asked. Cinch gave no response but didn't look away. "I've never been, but I read about the way the canopy filters light, how the air's so thick with pollen it turns everything orange during the bloom cycle. Must have been something." He adjusted the brace on his left arm, wincing. The joint still popped unpredictably, and the surrounding tissue remained swollen despite cryotherapy and daily mobility drills. The med technician had told him the joint might never regain full function. "No climbing for me, probably," he muttered. "Not that I was ever much good at it." Cinch let out a low chuff. Nathaniel laughed, then coughed. "Don't sass me." The copper-skinned observer made a quiet trill. Nathaniel turned his head. "Something funny." The alien didn't respond. He exhaled and leaned back. "They're going to ask me to stop soon. I'm not officially cleared for long-term integration. This wasn't supposed to be permanent." Cinch rose and padded forward, close enough that the heat from its body radiated through the air between them. It lowered its head until its breath stirred Nathaniel's collar. Then, slowly, it dropped to the floor again, its chest brushing the ground with a muffled thud. "You're not making this easier," Nathaniel said. "You know that, right?" The following day, Tira arrived with a portable case and a list of calibration metrics. She knelt beside Nathaniel in the buffer zone, unfolding a small neural resonance scanner. "This isn't about proving anything," she said as she adjusted the device. "It's about documentation." "I'm not the one who needs proving," Nathaniel replied. "Scan him. We already have, not like this. Scan him while I'm in here." She hesitated, then activated the scanner. A lattice of soft green light bathed the interior of the enclosure. Cinch didn't flinch. The device began to hum. After 2 minutes, it beeped twice. Tira examined the readout. "There's a spike in limbic coherence. Elevated recognition markers. Repeated exposure to your presence triggers a consistent shift in neural activity." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "Meaning? He's not just tolerating you, he's anticipating you. That implies associative memory, possibly even emotional conditioning. Say it simpler. You matter to him." An hour later, Varnox called a tribunal of senior staff. Nathaniel wasn't invited, but was summoned once the decision had been made. He walked into the sterile conference room with his arm still in a sling and his ribs wrapped tight under a fresh shirt. Varnox stood by the center display, flanked by 3 non-human administrators and 1 human diplomat with a tired expression and a datapad full of redacted transcripts. "We believe the Rakkari has formed a non-hostile dependency," Varnox said. "This creates opportunities." Nathaniel waited. Drazari Prime's ecosystem has remained largely inaccessible due to the Rakkari threat. If your relationship with this one proves replicable, we may be able to develop a model for safe re-entry, controlled relocation, possible cohabitation. The human diplomat cleared her throat. "You would act as facilitator under strict protocol, no improvisation." Nathaniel scratched his jaw. "You mean you want me to go down there with him?" Silence. "Not saying I won't," Nathaniel added. "But if this is about reducing them to lab assets, I'm not interested." Varnox narrowed his eyes. "You would rather let them remain a galactic hazard." "I'd rather we stop assuming we're the only ones who get to decide what's dangerous." The diplomat looked at her pad. "We'll need to run full psych evaluations before any field assignments." "Fine. But I'm not going to be your leash." The next day, the relocation chamber was prepped. It was a large, domed space built to simulate planetary travel conditions. Artificial gravity, atmospheric controls, and a sky dome that mimicked Drazari light cycles. Nathaniel entered first, limping slightly but upright. Cinch followed, stepping through the sliding doors without hesitation. The chamber sealed. Cinch walked a slow circle around the perimeter. Nathaniel sat in the middle and waited. After a full rotation, the creature returned and lay beside him. The simulation began. Wind swept through the chamber, carrying artificial pollen. The sky turned orange. A low, ambient hum mimicked distant fauna calls. Cinch raised its head and let out a sound Nathaniel hadn't heard before, soft, layered, almost melodic. Not quite a howl, not a growl, something older. It echoed in the dome. Nathaniel didn't speak. He just sat there, arm resting against the creature's side. As the false sun lowered behind the chamber wall by dusk, they weren't studying each other anymore. They were just sharing the evening.